we welcome on Call of Duty League commentator and analyst Chance to the program. Chance, tell me, man, how have these past few days been for you in learning all of the news that's been going on?
Oh, God, I'm having an ad play. That's not okay. Sorry, this is terrible timing. It's been great and relaxing and very stress-free now that everything is done. The past few days, I've literally been grinding like GBs on old Call of Duties and playing in League play. And I've been telling you, man, I forgot how fun it could be. So, I don't know, past few days, I've been having a blast.
That's good, man. That's good. Because it seems as if, like, the talent side of things, the people who are, like, covering all this stuff, we're having a blast. But, like, the players and the organizations, like, it is, like, totally opposite of, like, the way that everyone else is treating it. It's almost like you're, like, watching, it's almost like watching a movie from, like, afar. And you're like, wow, that's awesome. I'm really glad that I'm not involved with that. But, hey, it's pretty cool to watch from afar. I feel like we do need to try and form some sort of order around all of the things that have happened pretty much since champs and now post champs. So we'll kind of take it subject by subject and attempt to try and tackle all of these. So first off, in terms of timing, it hasn't really been that long, but in terms of what has happened since then, it feels like it's been forever ago. Dallas Empire, by the way, they do manage to win the World Championship. I know you were high, along with a lot of other people on the Atlanta FaZe team. What did you make of the championship final that we saw and the very solid performance that came through from the Empire?
I think a short version would be like it's a couple different storylines like coalescing. Like I was high on FaZe even right before the grand finals. I was still saying I think they're going to win despite being down like a map. But Dallas was a team for at least the like previous 3 or 4 home series. I think I was even saying it on broadcast. Like this is the team that is playing the game the best. Like they have the best teamwork. If you're going to beat them, you have to play nearly perfectly. You can't afford to make mistakes. And in my mind, FaZe is one of those teams that like could afford to make maybe a tiny mistake and have enough talent to like go over the top with it. But it was not only the team that had been playing the best as of recent. There was a fairly soon in when Rambo Ray got picked up on the team, he put out some content piece and there like something happened when he was commentating over Shotzi's gameplay where he made a note. He was like, ooh, there's actually some stuff that I could talk about right here, but I don't want to teach anybody else about the extremes you can push of where you can stand and manipulate spawns, the little details about locking doors, the line of sight Illy had. And he had mentioned that. And then I started having conversations with Ben at the time and then Miles of like, when champs comes, there's going to be a couple teams that just like pull stuff out of their bag of tricks that know just a little bit more. And it seemed like Dallas saved almost all of it for Atlanta. It's like the wallbang spot Clay had on construction top third on Ramaza. It was some weird like rotations they had on Azir Cave. It's the Illy spot and God knows what else they were doing. Like they had a better understanding of the game seemingly than any other team and the talent to like make it happen. So the win was like almost the perfect ending for any one team to get for champs.
Yeah, I feel like, too, whenever I personally made the prediction that I thought Dallas Empire had the ability to win the championship, my thought process was very similar to yours. It was like this idea that I feel like I can trust the Dallas Empire more than any other team. We talk about in-game stuff, and we talk about out-of-game stuff, and I basically bought into the fact that I felt like they had this extra gear, if you will. Like they could reach this next level. Not that it would be so far and above everybody else, but the fact that they had like almost everything working for them at the right time. And the one thing that personally kind of sold me was in their London performance when we saw like, and granted, we have to talk about the teams they faced off against, but in general, when they go on that run and it's not necessarily Shotzi going off, right? It is Illy, it is Krent, like everybody seemed to be in the right state of mind kind of coming into this final. And I feel like for me, and I want to hear your thoughts on this one as well, I kind of based on everything that we knew coming into that winners final, not necessarily the championship grand final, that for me was like, okay, like their confidence is through the roof. We talk about the 3 young guys, the record versus FaZe all season long. For me, I almost felt like the winners final was in some ways who won the event. Not that necessarily, you know, that was the end all be all, but I felt like for the Empire specifically, once they got that done and they kind of knew that they had what it took, granted, given the circumstances that, you know, there was a number of different falters that FaZe made, but that for me was enough at the time to be like, okay, I'm good with the Empire. Granted, it's a one map, you know, advantage that doesn't really mean a ton in the overall scheme of things, but that kind of showed me that the Empire is going to take advantage of any mistake that FaZe makes. And granted, there aren't very many, but when they do, it can cause some problems. But in your eyes, do you think that winners final, did that prove anything to you in particular? Did that make you feel better about the Empire, or did you just think that FaZe kind of lost it in the clutch and that would change up?
I mean, so initially, no, the winners final didn't prove anything to me because, again, I was picking FaZe even going into the grand final. The part that proved to me was I can't remember who was speaking to Clayster before the champs. I think it might have been Maven. Like, he was talking to Clay right before it happened, and he was like, hey, don't say any of this on broadcast because it's Clay's analysis, not ours type deal. But if you looked at the map set from the grand finals, even in their head-to-head, the first 3 maps that were going to be played, Dallas had a 1-7 map record against FaZe. Like, they had been getting blown out of the water. Then the next 3 maps were favored for Dallas, and then I think the final one was like close to a 50-50 split. So even Clay was going into the series saying, hey, as long as we can win one of those like first 3 maps, it was something like that, then we're going to be great for the series because it's stacked for the back half. So I was expecting FaZe to win even after the winners finals, the grand finals. And then the first map happened on Azir Cave, the 251-60 sort of blowout. And that was a moment where I was like, oh, damn, Dallas came to play. Because, by the way, another crazy thing, Dallas, the entire regular season, did not win a single Azir Cave. They went 3-0, I think, or maybe 4-0 in playoffs last champs. Again, they just saved stuff for the end, I think. But it was not that map that solidified it, but then it was the map to the Gunrunner. I think they were 0-3 against FaZe on that map, and then they teed off them for the second one, and that was the moment where I was like, oh, damn, this is about to be one of the fastest grand finals, despite the fact that it's a best-of-9. So, like, it took a very long time in my mind, and obviously I was blind to it the entire time that Dallas was that good, but it took up until, like, the third map of the series where I was like, oh, damn, like, there's no way Dallas are going to lose this. And frankly, they did so well in the grand finals that I'd be willing to bet even if they lose the winners finals match, assuming they get past Chicago Huntsmen, like, they're just winning that series. It seemed like 10 out of 10 times. Like, it seemed like there was nothing FaZe could do towards the end. Like, Dallas just, they had everybody's number.
Yeah, man, they did. I think they definitely not only impressed everybody who was kind of watching from a spectator perspective, but I think they also kind of showed themselves that they had, like, kind of, like I said, this extra gear that I think not only were we questioning if they had, but they kind of themselves thought it as well. Well, kind of with that victory, we'll kind of continue on with the positives here for a time. Crimsix and Clayster, they obviously both win their 3rd world championship. Clayster becomes only the 3rd player ever to go back to back. And kind of light of all the achievements, of all the positives that come through and what this Dallas Empire victory means, Chance, simply put, Crimsix, greatest of all time?
Yeah, I mean, I had him as the greatest of all time before, like, this year started. Like, so in my mind, the top 3 for the past, I don't know, 3-4 years, it's Crim, Scump, and Karma. And you can pretty much pick whatever order, and you can make a pretty good argument. I've always leaned towards Crim just because when I first started asking this question, like, I remember asking TP in Black Ops 3 Champs who he thought, and he was like, oh, Crim without a doubt. And I was like, all right, if TP's saying that, like, that's good enough for me. But it's one of those 3, right? You pick your order. And in my mind, since they all went to separate teams, like, whoever had the best year this year could have then had that, like, extra something little, like, argument. Like, if Scump had won this year, I'd have been saying, all right, I think Scump is the greatest because he was, like, maybe close enough to Crim that you could have counted it. But, like, he just got his 3rd ring with his, like, 3rd ever team or org or whatever. He's just always been the best, most chips. Like, there's what argument is against Crim? There is none in my mind. Solidified number 1 for the moment. But obviously next year things could change because now there's 3 different guys behind him right in the running that if they have a good enough year could, you know, mix it up a bit.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think personally for me, regardless of whether or not Crim won this championship, I was kind of always on the camp of, like, in terms of, like, what Crim has done. I feel like when you really look at the details and instead of saying, oh, well, it's 3 world championships versus 2, that was always the thing. And in my eyes, it was like, okay, I feel like, I don't know, it's like we always associate, like, it's almost as if the nickname for Karma is GOAT. And that just, like, instantly associates, for me at least, a lot of people to think, oh, well, GOAT, that means greatest of all time. There's a lot of players who are kind of called that. I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve to be one of the players who has been called that for the past few years, but for me, the World Championship thing doesn't always necessarily mean one is better than the other. I think that obviously World Championships clearly help, but I was kind of in that same camp of, like, I feel like Crim, based on the level of success, the guy's won 30 plus times. I mean, there's so many different things that you can kind of stack up that and I think Nameless had kind of said this along with everybody else. It's like now it's undisputed. Like you can obviously there are going to be people who try to throw things out, but now there is zero question in terms of when you look at the highest level of achievements that Karma has, you compare them to Krim. It's now there is nothing that counters one way or the other. But I want to ask you though, where does Clayster now rank on that list? Because now, like I said, he joins the triple world championship club, only a part of 3 other players that have done so. The other 2 are Krim and Karma. Goes back to back, has been very successful. And the age of 28 years old, he's won back-to-back championships. Where does he rank currently for you? Just, I mean, a range, or where does he exactly sit on that list?
Okay, I'll start this out with solidified top 4. I don't know if you could really make an argument for anyone being above him and pushing him lower on the list. Also, I started a war on Twitter with this. When I tweeted it out and it turned into my mentions, by the way, still getting blown up of people arguing about everything. But I honestly don't have an answer for this one. I haven't taken the time to really dive into it. Clay is guaranteed top 4. You could probably argue him as high as number 2, but I think most people would keep him in that 4 spot, still behind Scum, still behind Carmen, obviously Krim. In my mind, I agree with Amos, that undisputed number 1 spot. I think some of the best arguments for Clay being potentially higher than Scum and Karma is okay, he's got all the world championships, done those with different teams. The thing he's lacking is the number of championships over time, but then he was never part of a dynasty roster. But then of course the counter to that is he wasn't making his team the dynasty rosters. An argument in the plus column would be maybe FaZe and AW when Optic was the best. FaZe is the team that had their number. He popped up for E United over an IW and started winning tournaments, taking him down. He's always been that guy that's been not quite the Aches level of thorn in their side because of champs, but right. The generic, he's going to be the guy that plays at his best, that can step up when he needs to. But I don't know. I don't really care. It doesn't really matter. He's guaranteed top 4 right now in my mind. I think he could go as high as 2, as low as 4. People could pick whatever they want. It's just, I mean, they're all still playing too. Well, except for Karma. I hope he comes back, but except for Karma. So what's the point? Because even calling Krim the GOAT now, again, let's say for whatever reason he retires in a year, Scump then goes on to play for 25 years and has hit the top of his game for all 25. Well, then nothing matters. There's no argument. It's such a fresh esport and such a fresh conversation that it only has so much meaning. But Clay top 4. There you go. Super long answer for that.
No, I appreciate that. That's a good point to bring up. Is that it's going to continually evolve. There's a reason why the Krim 6 and Karma debate has only lasted for what, a few seasons. Now we're going to have this debate of what kind of looks on for the future. But in terms of continuous talking points, something that's also very interesting, we found out Cold War played in 4v4. We saw it on the COD League Twitter. The intel that was released, it said 4v4 is being played for Cold War in comparison to what we've seen for the past 2 seasons, which has been 5v5 chance. Tell me, man, what'd you make of the 4v4 announcement? What do you think of it now in comparison to 5v5? Is it a good move in your opinion? And maybe some things moving forward with the Switch, how things get impacted, etc.
I mean, I think the community is already on the spot. It's okay, we need to pay our condolences to the 12 guys that are now losing their spot effectively. Even if it's 12, right? Because even Toronto Ultra, they might have to drop 2 players now because they only need 8 if they want to have 2 teams. So it might be more than 12. And I think the entire community is we're going to pay our condolences now, but as soon as that game comes out, we're just going to be having a ton of fun with it being back to 4v4 because it just flows so much better for I would. Aches has always said we've always been playing 4v4 on maps designed for 6v6, and I feel we've never quite properly gotten a 5v5 game designed for 5v5.
Yeah.
And granted, we've only had 2 years with it, but 4v4 has always played better. It's less chaotic. It's so much easier to keep up with. I think every game mode across the board gets more entertaining, more fresh. In my mind, really the only downsides for the 4v4 thing is just that players are losing their jobs, and that makes it incredibly difficult for not only the pros to stay on top, but for the challenger circuit for those players to even make a name for themselves because there's just that much less. And I do agree with the idea. I think Krim has been pushing it hard. He's it would have been perfectly fine if we expanded the CDL in conjunction with it. But at the same time, I don't know how difficult it is to pick up new teams or to orchestrate that. I don't know what goes on behind it. And I do think that 4v4 is generically just better for Call of Duty outright. So I'm mostly in the positive camp, but obviously, like,
Sure.
losing the players does suck.
Right. There's positives and negatives to both. And I agree with that. I think for me, in terms of the 4v4 versus 5v5 debate, it's like of this mindset that I don't necessarily think that the idea of 5v5 is a problem. I think that the idea is great. Kind of like this issue of like, on paper it looks good, but in reality, based on the way that the maps function and those things, I think that's where the issue kind of starts to come in. I think personally, like 5v5 has obviously worked in other esports. It's worked in other FPSs. Given there's obviously a number of different differences there, but still, I think that there could have been a solution, but I feel like it's not. You really have to do a lot of changing up in order to really make sure that could, kind of function properly. I hate to have to move on, but we've got a lot of things that we still need to hit on. With the announcement of 4v4 Cold War, the Dallas Empire, the team who just won a world championship, just days later decided to go ahead and make the move. They make the announcement that they themselves have already made a decision. Clayster is deemed the one who is not fit as currently. He sits now as a restricted free agent. Chance, what'd you make of the news?
I mean, bro, that's a 3-time world champ that got dropped like a few days, a day, whatever it was after. Like, I know generically, and Clay mentioned this as well, like he's happy in the guard that like if he's going to be dropped, it happens soon enough that he has the maximum amount of time to like figure something out, to get on a new team, that sort of thing. But like, obviously it just sucks, right? Like the team did nothing wrong. He did nothing wrong. Krim was even saying that like this is the best team that he has like ever played with. There was nothing but positive things coming out of the camp. They improved exactly when they needed to, peaked at the right time, did everything right from literally day one. And then their hand is forced. But like, I don't know. I suppose the good news is Clay had a good enough year that in my mind, he is solidified. He's going to find a roster. He's going to be on a good team. And there is that like safety net in the background, because like if they had a poor finish and then a player gets dropped, like again, there's going to be 12 minimum players that are not going to have a job next year. Clay's not one of those guys. It's a crappy circumstance, but like I'm less concerned about Clay's success in the future than many other different players in the league.
Yeah. And I got to say too, you think that Clayster was the right player to move out, moving into 4v4 with Dallas?
I think it's the safest pick purely because, like, Crim's a flex, Clayster can run the main AR, and frankly, any of the other three can pretty much do whatever they want. And I think it pretty much comes down to, like, Crim or Clay. Like, it has to, and then one, you have the undisputed GOAT on, and then the other one is, like, now top 4 and is phenomenal and a great leader, but they bring enough of, like, the same style of things to the table that, like, obviously can't get rid of Hook. He's disgusting talent. Envy is, I don't think, ever letting him go. Even if, like, as long as there is a console esport around, like, Hook is going to be there with that organization, and there's no reason they should stray away. Same thing with Shotzi. He's just too good. And then Illy, probably one of the more underrated players from the year, just because we spent too much time talking about everyone else type deal. So, like, I think everyone knows, and if anyone was really looking at the team, they would have to say it's got to be between Crim or Clay, and then Crim's just the undisputed GOAT. Like, it's just, again, the team was well designed. It's just what it ends up coming down to.
Now, the big conversation comes about pretty much instantly, right? After we see this announcement, it's not a matter of, okay, well, what's going to happen now with Clayster? It's like, well, he's going to find a position. It's just a matter of what player gets moved out of the way for someone like Clay, given the fact that there is no expansion, given the fact that obviously we are switching to 4v4. There's at least going to be one move made from every single team that exists in the CDL. I think it's important to talk on next destinations for Clayster, kind of given the position that we are in right now. I want to kind of hear a few of yours. I'll go and let you critique my list. Okay, I'm going to give you my top 2 right now, destinations that I think could be likely for Clayster to go to, and I want to hear your thoughts, comparisons, contrasts, things of that nature. First team that I think makes the most sense is the Atlanta FaZe. Now, hear me out on this. I get the Atlanta FaZe just finished second. I get the fact that they are in the current position that they are in. There are 5 guys who wanted to play with each other. They're young. I get it. I think that the issue that Atlanta FaZe ran into when we talk about, especially in that grand final, which I hope taught them a lot, I think that they kind of lacked essentially not the talent issue, because I feel like they were almost like the old Optic teams that we used to see, where it's like the talent is unmatched. The same issue that the Optic team used to deal with is the same issue that the Atlanta FaZe team is dealing with. It's this idea of In-game skill, no problem. I feel like sometimes it can be the intangibles of how to utilize those players properly. And I feel like with Crowder, obviously being a coach, that helps. But being internally in the game, there are so many little things that have to happen at once. I feel like you need somebody for that. I feel like on paper, if you were to throw Clayster into this team, makes sense, right? You have Simp and Abizi. They've obviously won a world championship before. He has a history with these guys. The problem then comes, well, what happens because you're the Atlanta phase? You picked up 5 all-star young talent. Now it's going to be hard enough to get rid of one of them. Now you have to get rid of 2 of them. And that's where, for me, the conflict comes about, is like whether or not the Atlanta phase are willing to make this move. I'll move on to the next one. I think Atlanta would make the most sense, for me at least, in terms of how 4v4 is going to work, etc. Next pick for me, New York Subliners. I think given the landscape, again, we talk about history, Zuma and Attach. It's a big brand. It's the city of New York. They want to try to expand. I don't know anyone's financial states right now, but if we're going off of, I guess, maybe pro sports history, I think they'll be able to afford them, unlike maybe a few other rosters could. And then again, like you said, you run into this thing where it's like, hey, we have some talent here. They showed some success. I think that it could make sense for Clayster to rejoin with some of his old compadres, and then you throw in maybe a young guy in Mac, and Accuracy, I know, has been a great leader for them. Clay can kind of step into that position. I know there was a lot of flack on Accuracy throughout this year, which I feel like a lot of the time wasn't always warranted. And then obviously the temp conversation is a hard one to have, and I guess you could kind of, cycle a few pieces around, but I don't know. Those 2 teams for me seem like the best, given what we know right now, which we don't know a ton. But do you like the 2 destinations that I've chosen? Anything that you'd throw in there differently, or anything of that nature?
I'll start out by saying that just like by default, again, Clayster, one of the best players of all time. Like any team, I think, is at the very least going to consider him and say, like, how's it going to fit on their team? The reason I don't think Atlanta is because I think Atlanta has the initial problem to solve of like, oh, we need to kick one player off the team. And then I think you have Beezy and Simp and Celium. They're going to be the 3. It's between Priest or Major Maniac. I think it makes sense just because of how good Priest and how good Major Maniac are, that at the start of the year, you just try to find the roster that works best, and you don't get rid of either one of them. I think you just keep that team. You just expect to go in at the start of the year to just throw one on a sub spot, unless like they need the money or like want to try to make a trade, which they could. But in my mind, phase, the only way they make an initial like switch off is just if they can pick up Octane. That in my mind is the only way, like that is the only clear-cut guarantee improvement, because yes, Clayster is great, can improve any team, but like him to Major Maniac, I would normally pick Clayster, but you have a year, Major Maniac brings a lot to the table.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows what FaZe wants to go through. So my guess would be they stick with their current roster, try out a couple different things, try out a couple different weapons, depending on what the weapon meta even is, and just play it safe with having Priest and Major Maniac in the background and have that like competition. I do not think the Subliners are going to drop Accuracy, because I haven't talked to Revan about this, but I have to imagine Accuracy is like the perfect AR for a coach like Revan, of like, he is going to be in very specific spots all the time. He's going to be the leader of the team. He is going to play incredibly structured in a way that you can have success, and you have to like build the team sort of like around that. And I think the Subliners might be like a team that can find a formula that works with Accuracy, to where, again, like Clay, one of the best players of all time, you absolutely have to look at it, but that wouldn't be my immediate jump. I think all of the teams in like the bottom half of the league definitely should be like actively attempting to get Clayster, because he would be a benefit to them all. But I don't necessarily know how likely that would be. Of course, as I say that, I basically eliminated the entire league, and I have no idea. But it's weird, too, because like, we've also heard, it's so tough. It really just is.
Right. No, that's the exact issue that I ran into as well. It was like, well, okay, marking off this team, marking off that. Because my thing is that, like, if you are Clay, right, especially after this win, you go back to back, right? You do it with 2 different teams. You make the claim that, hey, I can work with any young talent and elevate them to win a world championship. Like, you have Simp and Abizi, you have Shotzi and Celium this year. You could argue Hook, which obviously is not a rookie, but still a young guy who's looking for his first world championship. He can take young talent to the next level. My worry, I guess you could say, for I guess teams that are kind of toward the bottom of the CDL this year, is not only the payment problem, but if you are Clay, I don't know if you want to start over. Like, I don't know if you're like, all right, Gorillas, let's try to figure this out. Like, I don't know if that's like a position where not only are the Gorillas, obviously they're going to be interested in someone like Clay if they have even the ability to get him, but I don't know if Clay is saying, yeah, take me there. I think it's going to be a matter of like some team is going to have to open the door, and apparently, according to some of Clay's tweets, it seems as if that could be the case. But my thing is that I just don't know whether or not a young roster can make it work, and I don't even know if Clayster wants to make that work. Because I think, and correct me if you think that I'm wrong, but I feel like if you're in Clay's position, he wants to go to a team that is at the very least decently competitive to the point of which they looked at some point solid last year. And again, it's hard because I don't know who you take away, because we're in this position where there are so many solid rosters from top to bottom that you get to this point and you're like, well, where can we find like happy medium, for example? I know a lot of people have brought up like the Chicago Huntsmen, like if Pristini is out of there, does that mean Arcides is? And then now you have like Clay and Formal. Like, it's just, there's so many different like issues that I'm honestly, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit like worried to see exactly like how this plane lands, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we already have players like Dashy sort of hinting at they already have like a team together, and like who the hell knows what that could even be. Actually, I will backtrack a little bit and say I forgot how spicy the New York pick was just because it's Clay getting back with Zoom and Attach, which could be like very interesting because those are all players that like I generally think if 4v4 could still work together very well. I would say generically Clay obviously wants to be on the best possible team. Two interesting picks for this, I think, are actually Minnesota and the Ravens. I think both of those teams are ARs that you look at and they're like, hey, they're good, but like Clay could be better. You have Crim6 even talking about Assault of being like, he's not really helping the team win. Like, unless they're picking up a two-piece on the entry to break, like a Hill, they're not having as much success. And depending on like how in their heads, like the players on either the Ravens or the Rocker are, they might be like, hey, Clay can be that guy. He can win with us. He's won with Silly in the past. I could very well see in Clayster being like, I would love to play with someone like Asim. He would be great on my team. Let me see if I could imagine Clay being like, I would love to play with Asim. I would love to play with Alex. Those would be great players in front of me. I played with Silly, but like in God or X maybe, like who knows. For the Ravens, the same thing. I could see Clay being like, I had to play against Dylan through all of Black Ops 4. I have to deal with him in the smoke on B-Dom on St. Petrograd all of this year. I know what kind of talent that man is. And then you could throw into Scraps, who's been disgusting. I mean, like, those are both teams that have a ton of potential. Zero still on the Ravens. Zero still on the Ravens, right? So, like, I think those might actually be the two best picks. I think I might change my tune. I would say FaZe and Subliners. FaZe least likely, just because I think there's too much talent before you start trying to do some crazy stuff. New York, I'm more sold on now that you give me the pitch, and I remember the Zoom and Attach thing. But I think Ravens and Rocker would probably be my two primary suspects.
That's interesting. I mean, I thought about Rocker for sure, but the Ravens thing, like, I didn't really anticipate all that much. Like, it entered my mind, but it never really kind of solidified. And I got to say, like, if there are teams that you have to consider, I think that they have to be in the conversation, given the history. Like, there's so many different things that you have to kind of, think about for the most part. But it's definitely going to be interesting. Like, I feel like Clayster, like, we always talk about like Call of Duty in itself, like the CDL or even just pro Call of Duty in general, esports. It is like a movie every single season where there's like one storyline that gets picked up. Like, I almost feel like we're left on a cliffhanger after every single season. And the cliffhanger of this year is like, okay, Empire wins. You think that's the end of the story. Side note, there's actually 10 minutes left in the final episode, and that's actually when Clayster gets dropped off the team. Like, and I think it'd be interesting to see if like Clay goes EU next season, and then that's how the way that the next year kind of starts off. I don't know, but go ahead.
I don't want to speak this into existence, but could you imagine if Clay joins the EU roster, plays with three players that Zero has the one championship back in IW with Splice, you tip the cap, but then other than that, no chips on the team, and takes those guys and starts winning tournaments with them or wins champs or something like that. Like, then it would be bowed down and be like, Crim, get out of here. Clay is now undisputed GOAT. Like, talk about how ridiculous of a storyline that would be. Like, that would be nuts. And at the same time, like, there's more teams out here. It could be even like a Florida Mutineers, right? Because like they have great players, but like who knows what happens next year with Cold War. That's like, there is literally 11 possibilities on board because of how good Clay is. But like, I don't know, that Ravens one, it seems spicy to me now. It gets me excited.
That one probably for me would be the most interesting, I think, if it were to.
Oh my God.
If it were to be announced, like everyone would just be caught off guard.
He went and played with Euros and Champs in like Ghosts, I think it was. Like, he got dropped off a team, needed a team for Champs, and he just played with 3 European players. I think I'm remembering this right.
That was, I think that. Wait, was that MW3? That couldn't have been. You said Ghost.
MW3 didn't have a champs.
Well,
Or not Ghost.
they
Sorry,
had,
I think
they had
when
the
did it come
XP. What Ghost? He was on. Who was he on? Was he on Optic?
Dude, it was such a long time ago.
Because Black Ops 2.
I need to go past Ghost.
Wait, it probably was Black Ops 2.
He was on Optic with Ghost. I need to go way back.
It was Black Ops 2, I'm pretty sure,
was it?
because he was on the team with Slacked, Spacely, in Huddle, maybe? And then there wasn't enough, like, I think that they were underage. They basically played for him to, like, get a qualification spot.
It was, so at UMG Chicago, Clay played with Parasite, Rambo, and Intake. And then at the Winter Championships on Unite, he played with Huddle, Slacked, and Spacely.
Yeah.
And then I guess I get dropped whatever the story was, and at Champs he played with Gunchi, Shane, and Tommy.
Okay. Interesting.
So I'm just saying, he has a history of, like, he gets dropped and plays with Euros. Like, he got top 24. So obviously he doesn't want to repeat that performance necessarily, but like there's something there, Landon. I'm telling you.
I mean, who knows, man? It's another Treyarch title. Maybe the foul makes it back in the guy. There's definitely things. Quickly before we let you go, last thing we have to hit on, actually on topic with the London Royal Ravens, is in fact the London team. It sounds as if there could be issues in their camp currently. We heard a few sound bites, kind of coming from Wuskin's stream yesterday. He basically tweets out that he's a full-time content creator now, possibly. Again, we don't know a ton from the quotes that we gained. It's basically this idea that Wuskin and Scraps had conversations with the London management, something involving contracts. Scrap later tweets out that it's something to do with re-signing contracts for next year. Do you think that this could be something to worry about if you are a London fan, given the noise around the team right now and given the quotes that we've heard from Wuskin saying the entire team might be dropped, we might all be free agents? Where do you think that sits? Is it as serious as it sounds?
I mean, I would say every single team outside of Dallas needs to be very concerned. Like, I don't know how much you know about this, and I know the community didn't like broadly get a pickup on every detail, but I think it might be fair to say that the roster mania we had to intro, like coming into the CDL, that might have been the craziest roster mania period we've ever had, of just pure chaos. Different teams are forming every single day, players attaching themselves to each other. And the I would have to imagine every single individual CDL team could basically write at least a short story on the path that they took to get the team that they want. And just, build a book off of it type deal. Like, it was ridiculous, the things that were almost happening that did happen, stuff like that. And now I think we take that and kick it up a notch, because now it's all the same teams having to get rid of at least one player, if not multiple. You got options like Clay coming in to try to mix things up. The number of players we did not even have play at Champs this year, your Loonies, Dashies, even though we got one map, Enable, Gunless, like all of these ridiculously talented players that we know should be like in starting spots in league, or like have that capability at the very least. And they just weren't even there for Champs. So now these guys all get back in the mix. Like, you have the European guys in the challenger scene from this past year that were just killing it all year long, that like are good enough to be in the league. Like, it's chaos. I don't know what the contracts look like, but I have to imagine every single team for the past month has been stressing out about what they have to do. So it's not just the Ravens, it is purely across the board. Again, except for, I guess, the Empire, who have this figured out already. They have the 4 they want to stick with. But other than that team, like, I got to imagine for everybody, there's at least a little bit of wonkiness that just is stressing people out, man. I'm telling you.
Oh boy, stress and potentially more stress only to come. But hey,
that's not for us.
Not for us. I love that. Not for us. We're having a great time over here just watching from afar. But that's Chance, Call of Duty League commentator and analyst. Chance, man, you enjoy yourself. You deserve a break. We'll talk again soon. Like I said, get some rest, especially after all the traveling that you did to get all those food pictures.
Yeah. Thank you, Landon. Thanks for having me on, man.